still have a quorum. I don't want to wait too long. I don't know why I can organize this stuff, but I just do it all on here. When I wasn't even. Hi. Hello, how are you? Good. Dave from the non-public schools is supposed to be coming too. So basically, everyone who's on the council right now, except for Dave from Chen, who couldn't come. Everybody who's on here will be here if Dave comes. Dave from the non-public schools. This is
Have you been appointed? Not that I'm aware of.
All right, well, I'll call the meeting to order. The first thing we're going to do is the October minutes. You know what, I forgot to have extra, I'm not used to this yet. I forgot to have extra, is there someone that doesn't have a copy of the minutes? Maybe you can look at someone next to you.
Okay.
All right, I have one thing I want to correct on it. It's not really a correction, it's just a different way of saying something. At the very end, when it says public comment, it says there was no public comment. Well, that's ambiguous, and you can't tell if we didn't have a public comment period, or we had one and no one spoke. So I think it should be changed to members of the public had no comments, because we did have, we asked for comments and no one made any. Does anybody else? Well, yeah, I'll let you finish reading it first if you haven't read it yet.
My only thing was under new business. I would just like it to state, not the best writer, just something about the information that I brought up, the request to the Department of Education. Heather was gonna look into the private school notifications and clarity. Do you guys remember when I brought that up? At the end of the
Not
meeting.
enough to, were we adjourned yet, or?
No, we had not adjourned, and basically, I had been notified by someone who does the notifications of homeschoolers in a private school, and they are not reporting their numbers at all. There was no spot on the form, and Heather was going to look into the form. I know that she's stepped down, but she was gonna look into the private school form.
All right, yeah.
So
Yeah,
just
put
some
that-
kind of mention
Put
of.
the- I
Okay,
don't,
so I'll put
I
in
remember
like,
hearing that, I remember
Oh.
hearing about that, yeah, that's what
okay,
that was
so I'll put in
there.
something like that you requested further information about non-public school reporting.
That's that Form
Yes.
A12
Okay.
something, I can't remember.
Right, she was gonna bring a copy of the form or
Yeah,
get a
'cause
copy
for-
so we could see it.
Last year, I think it was last year, or the year before, it finally got resolved as to what they were gonna do with that form. And as far as I knew, it was basically a guess. The schools had to guess how many homeschoolers they had and report that.
Right, and Heather was saying that's not, they're
Yeah.
only reporting new homeschoolers.
Yeah.
They're
And
not-
that's.
Well, that would make sense.
Yeah,
New homeschoolers
Yeah,
would make
because they're
sense.
only reporting new enrollments.
Yeah,
right, but the private schools. it
so the
sounds like
private
they're
school
not.
wasn't doing anything.
Mhm.
Yeah, that needs to be looked into. I'll make a note of that.
Okay.
Any other comments on the minutes? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes with changes. Anybody want to do that?
Seconded. Oh, actually, Accept the minutes as amended, sorry.
Anybody second
So you're
that?
saying
Do I have a second for that? Yeah, Jen, okay. All right. All right. Okay, chairman's report. The information on the HEAC page has been all corrected, as far as I know anyway. I don't think there's any more errors on there. Everyone who's on the council is now listed on that. We took care of yours.
Okay.
Senator Ward's been listed on the Senate site as the representative from the Senate, but it hadn't been on our site. So everyone is correctly listed. We also got the minutes, not the minutes, the meeting information changed. The meetings that are actually scheduled, it's indicated on the website, scheduled meeting. And then the dates that we have for possible meetings, if we need them, say placeholder or something like that. So people who are looking on that webpage will know what the scoop is. So it would be useful if each of you check the spelling of your name and your email and all that. As far as I know, it's correct, as I tried to make sure they were all correct. But guess what, you'll know that better than I will. We also indicate, oh yeah, that's the meetings that are listed. Commissioner Edelblut has received nominations from the School Boards Association and from the Principals Association. And he's going to be meeting with those nominees probably next week.
Wow.
I don't think he
That's
had...
a change in the way people have been appointed in the past.
Well, not really. In the early years, the commissioners always did the appointing themselves. And then at some point, I don't remember what year it was, one of the commissioners decided to submit the nominees to the state board. But that's really not necessary because the council is set up by law as advising the commissioner.
Well, no, all I mean is that it used to be that people who were appointed submitted a resume, they didn't meet with the commissioner before the appointment.
Even the resume part, that only goes back about 10 years. But yeah, you're right, people didn't always meet with the commissioner, but that's what he wants to do, so.
So they received nominations from the School Board Association and the Principals?
And the Principals Association,
All
yeah,
right, I just want to make sure I have it right.
yeah. And then Dave Menard, who's a homeschooler representing the Christian Home Educators, he sent me an email informing me that he has to resign. So I replied to him and asked him if Chen had a replacement for him. I haven't heard back, but I'm assuming that he'll get back to me in the next few days. So right now, taking into account Dave Menard's resignation, we have 3 vacant seats, but 2 of them are probably going to be filled next week. So by the next meeting in January, we should have a full council. And that's really important because if we don't get the input of the principals and the superintendents, as well as the homeschoolers, if we don't get that input, then it's difficult to come up with suggestions that will work for everybody. We don't want to float things out there, especially if we're in a rulemaking process. We don't want to be making rules that will either, to put it mildly, trample the homeschoolers or trample the schools. We have to, we have to be objective about it.
I have a question about, with David Menard resigning, shouldn't we open it up? I mean, that's not a Chen seat,
No,
so
no, it's
should
not
we,
a-
can we notify our homeschool groups that there's an opening, or if
It's-
anybody wants to?
Yeah, it's not a Chen seat, and, anybody can submit a nomination for it,
Okay.
but, there's no harm in Jen submitting a nomination either.
Oh, absolutely not, I just want to make sure, you know,
Yeah,
it's okay. Just-
Especially since they're a big group.
yeah, they,
They're not really anymore, unfortunately. Yeah, Chen, as soon as they stopped doing their annual conference.
well, they stopped doing the conference
Yeah, as
because
soon as
nobody
they
was
stopped
coming.
doing the conference, it's not very
Yeah,
good.
so
Here,
I
no,
felt
I'll
those
find
last
a-
week, and he
I'll
said
find
they're
a seat.
basically non-functional.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, it's not.
But a lot of times now, it's online stuff. It's hard for anybody to get membership showing up, except at a local support group, if they're going there for the gym or something like that. But I remember when we first started homeschooling, we could get a good number of people to come to a statewide meeting, because there was no internet, and if you wanted to talk to people, that's how you did it. And it's not like that anymore, unfortunately. I mean, the internet's okay, but I still think face-to-face works a whole lot better than just the internet stuff. So the commissioner is scheduled to come in today and talk to us. So as soon as he comes in, I'm gonna give him the floor, because he's also gotta be, I think, in Manchester. He's gotta be out of town for another appointment a little bit later on. So as soon as he comes in, he speaks. Looking at what was discussed at the last meeting for meeting procedures, I worked with Cara on a draft, and we're gonna be discussing this today under old business, and be discussing and voting on it. And I just wanted to explain that except for the section on the annual report that's in there, the rest of these procedures, that's what we used to do when Elaine Rapp and Abby Lawrence were chair. What I've got in here is basically what we were doing then. Amy's style was a little more informal, nothing wrong with that, but I think that this way here, there's so many new people on the council now, people that haven't been here very long, that I think, a written procedure is kind of a useful thing, so that it's not just off the wall, we'll do whatever we feel like. Because in the beginning, see, everybody that was on it were people who were used to the legislative scenario, and with meetings and with dealing with these kinds of issues. And a lot of us knew each other from the fact that we had been working on the legislation, or we had met some of the school people who had also testified. It's not like that anymore, so. So we'll take care of that later. At the January meeting, the department attorney is going to be here, and she's going to go over what I'm going to call the right to know procedures. Because the law itself, depending on the font, is 10 pages. It could be 12 pages, like I said, depending on the font. There's a lot there. And on top of that, the Attorney General's, what did he call it, a commentary, I think. The Attorney General's commentary that was written in 2015, that's 134 pages. So, I don't think that at every time we go to do something, we're gonna read 134 pages of commentary and 10 pages of law. So, we're gonna prepare, with the help of the department attorney, a brief summary of the right to know procedures, so that, we don't accidentally forget to do something that we're supposed to do, or accidentally do something that we're not supposed to do. This is something else that, in the past, we had been briefed on this, but I have a feeling that the briefing we got was probably kind of incomplete, because we didn't do anything that we thought was against these right to know regulations. And people talked about 91A2. So I looked at 91A2 and 91A3. Well, geez, it turns out there's a whole lot more to the right to know law than 91A2 and 91A3. And then there were changes made. I think the last ones were 2015, 2016, and which I didn't know about. So going forward, we need to be more informed about this, and we will be. So, like I said, we're going to prepare a clear summary, because the 134 pages from the AG, most of that doesn't apply to us. There's a lot of different aspects of it that we don't get involved in. And the same thing with the actual 10 pages of the law. It's not all applicable to us. So we will boil it down to something that we can look at and be familiar with so we don't screw up. Okay. So the last month, since the last meeting, I've spent a lot of time talking to various people and various organizations, trying to get things, some things needed to be corrected. Some of that's an annual thing, so I took care of that. But most of the phone calls and contacts coming into me were from my own association, and they weren't dealing with ordinary homeschool stuff, it was all legislation. So that's not gonna be part of my report, because it really doesn't come under it. But that's most of the contacts that I got in the past few weeks. I also put my phone number on that HEAC webpage. So I may end up getting more questions and concerns from people outside of my association now, because